What is going on, tacticians? My name is Nathan Ng, and today we're going to be covering the Kayle comp in depth so you can go ahead and start dominating your TFT games. With the recent 11.4 patch update, Kayle has seen some substantial nerfs to her kit and the Divine trait. However, with most of the other compositions being nerfed as well, she is still a staple of the meta and is one of the comps with the highest potential cap. Speaking of potential cap, if you want to reach your highest rank, please feel free to join ProGuides.com. We have Challenger coaches that can help you reach your dream rank. Now, moving on with the video. Kayle is arguably one of the most versatile forecasters in the game, and she is able to utilize a whole wide range of different items as well. That being said, Kayle and the units surrounding her are generally quite expensive, so you'll need to learn how to play good early to mid game to put yourself in a spot to transition to Kayle at level 8. When aiming to play Kayle, our preferred start is Rod. There are two reasons behind this. Firstly, Kayle can use multiple rods in the form of Jewel's Gauntlet, Ginsu's Rageblade, and even Rabadon's Deathcap. Secondly, Rod can build a very useful early game item that can go ahead and help you streak up and build up economy to get you to those later levels. Examples being Locket of Iron Solari, Morrocrux, and Ionic Spark. Bow is also a good option, but it limits your early game options as there aren't that many great slammable items that help you win streak. You might have amazing Kayle items with Rapid Fire Cannon, Ginsu's, and Quicksilver Sash. However, making these items early doesn't really give you that necessary power unless you manage to find one of the few holders such as Callista or Shyvana, both of which are 3-cost units. Also, if you're unlucky during your rolldown and don't find a Kayle, your options are extremely limited, as Kayle is one of the only ones that can optimally use these items well. If you don't manage to get a rod or a bow, virtually all components are usable as long as you can build early game items, peep, or streaks such as Sunfire, Chalice of Power, and Zeke's Herald. This is why the Kayle comp is very flexible, as you can slam better early game items and still have a pool of usable items for her to pump out damage. Also, if you're unlucky with the roll down but built flexible items, you always have the option to swap out to different comps rather than trying to hard force Kayle. If you're in a position to play Kayle, the pool of usable items for her are a mix of damage and defense. Items include Rapid Fire Cannon, Ginsu's Rageblade, Duelist Spatula, Jeweled Gauntlet, Rabadon's Deathcap, Giant Slayer, Hand of Justice, Quicksilver Sash, Trap Claw, and Guardian's Angel. Static Shiv seems to be a decent option after the rework, but we still think that items such as Rapid Fire Cannon and Jeweled Gauntlet are a little bit better. And that leads us to our question of the day. What are your ideal best in slot items for Kayle? Let us know in the comments down below. Your goal in the early game is to play as strong of a board as possible with your items and chosen. Having said this, there are some boards that make your transition a lot easier than others. We'll go ahead and talk about a few examples. Sharpshooter and a frontline. Teemo paired with Nicolai or Tristana can make a solid backline and provide enough DPS throughout stage 2 and 3, especially if you manage to secure items such as Chalice of Power or Zeke's Herald. If you're using Tristana, you could consider picking up Braum and going for a Vanguard frontline paired with either Garen, Wukong, or Nautilus. This way, by adding a unit such as Brand, you can easily fit in 3 Dragon Soul, which is very potent in the early stages and provides a lot of DPS. If you go down the Nicolai route, you could consider going Warlord by playing a mix of Garen, Jarvan, or Vi. This leaves you open to 3 frontline options with Vanguard, Keeper, or Brawler, which are all great if you can get a hold of some 2-star units. If you manage to find all the sharpshooters, consider holding onto them as you can play 4 with Sivir in the mid game, which we'll be looking at later. This opener revolves around 2 core units in Jax and Fiora, as they provide great mix of damage, utility, and tank. The support cast wants to be a mix of Enlightened, Duelist, and Divine. So naturally, champions such as Janna, Nasus, Wukong, and Yasuo are also all great options. So now you have an idea of what types of openers you can play, you might be wondering how you can go about navigating the early game in terms of economy and leveling. Let's go ahead and start at stage 1-3, just before the PvP round begins. If you feel strong meaning that you have a team with 2 stars, very good slammable items, or both at the same time, you might want to consider pre-leveling to start pushing for a win streak to build your economy and preserve your HP. Note, if you don't start with a lot of gold or spent a lot on your board, you might level at 2-1 rather than 1-3 for the same reasons. If you didn't manage to get lucky at either the start with the units or items, you most likely don't want to level and try making it to the 10 gold mark as soon as possible. Continue trying to make the next interest thresholds until 3-2 by playing your strongest natural board. If you did pre-level and are managing to win the first 3 PvP matches, you'll likely want to pre-level again at 2-3 to continue that streak into Crumbz. The reason being is that you can play an additional unit after Carousel and have better shops at level 5, both of which will assist you in achieving that goal. In the mid game, it is essential that you're preserving as much HP as possible while also making as much econ as you can. After Krugs at stage 3-2, you'll want to go to level 6 most games. Now, you have two options depending on your start. Firstly, if you manage to streak and your board is strong, you most likely don't need to roll and can just add in another unit. On the other hand, if you're making consistent econ through stage 2 and losing, now you can utilize some of that gold to stabilize your mid game by rolling for a good chosen and a solid team. Ideally, you still want to be around 30 gold after leveling to 6, but in some low roll games, you might have to go down to 20 or even 10 if your board is really weak. Taking our early game Divine and Duelist comp of Jax, Fiora, Janna, and Nasus, we can extrapolate our team to add in a mix of units such as Irelia, Kalista, Yuumi, Kindred, and Vladimir. Irelia, Yuumi, and Kindred are especially great pickups as they're part of the late game comp in the vast majority of matches and won't need to be sold later. Kalista and Vladimir open up more mid game options with Siphoner, Duelist, and Cultist, but obviously play around with what you hit and you're chosen. For the sharpshooter comps, there are a lot of variations. You can play either your core sharpshooters of Teemo, Tristana, and Nicolai. You can potentially look to add in Sivir for the 4 sharps and make her your Kayle item holder for the mid game. For frontline, you'll add in the higher cost units of whichever you manage to hit. For example, if you want Vanguards, look to add in better units such as Braum, Nautilus, Sejuani, and Aatrox. Sejuani and Aatrox in particular are good as they can be used in a variation of our endgame composition. At stage 4-1, you'll go to level 7 and evaluate if your current board is strong enough to let you get to level 8 with enough HP and economy to roll. If your board is very weak compared to the other players, consider rolling to upgrade your board to a decent state by 2-starring some of your favorite units and potentially finding one Kayle to start building up your endgame comp. An example of a level 7 board with this strategy would be Kayle, Kindred, Yuumi, Irelia, Shen, Jax, and Nasus or Wukong. After rolling at 7, your aim is to start building up your econ back up and try to reach level 8 by either 4-5 or 5-1. Continue rolling for your endgame comp when you have enough gold to do so. And if you have the HP to spare, you can go ahead and sack 3 rounds at 4-1 and go level 8 after Carousel at 4-5 to roll down completely and have the chance to find a 4-cost chosen, Kayle being preferable for obvious reasons. This strategy is much riskier because you have to be able to transition quickly, otherwise you might bleed out too hard during the roll down. So if you're uncomfortable or new to the comp, it's generally a good idea to roll at least some amount of gold at 7 to slowly transition rather than the full transition in 1 or 2 turns. If you're having a high roll game and your mid game board is strong enough during stage 4, you'll likely still want to go to level 8 at 4-5, but don't roll until Raptors to give yourself the best chance to hit. Alright, let's go ahead and talk about the different variations that you can run with Kayle. So the core units of the comp are Kayle, Kindred, Yuumi, and Shen. These units give you 2 Executioner, 2 Spirit, and 2 Mystic. The first variation would be the unending CC Vanguard frontline duo of Sejuani and Aatrox. You'll need at least 1 Divine unit, so generally Irelia is the best champion of choice as she also gives you Adept with Shen. Your final unit can either be Xayah for more DPS, or Azir if you need the extra bodies as bait for Assassins, Aatrox, or Aurelion Soul. Taking a look at the comp as a whole, it would be Kayle, Kindred, Yuumi, Shen, Aatrox, Sejuani, Irelia, and Azir/Xayah. The second variation would be the Siphoner variation with Morgana and Swain. With the setup, you can look to run more Divine units with Lee Sin, Irelia, and Jax, giving you 4 Divine, 2 Adept, 2 Enlightened, and 2 Duelist. Alternatively, you can add in other legendaries with Yone, Azir, or Zilean. Generally, you'd want to go this variation if you have Morellonomicon for Morgana, as it's a nice secondary for source of damage. An example of the Siphoner comp would be Kayle, Kindred, Yuumi, Shen, Morgana, Swain, Yone, and Azir. Obviously, each variation can be altered depending on which chosen you hit. If you manage to get a hold of an Executioner chosen, you almost always want to run 4 Executioners by adding in Xayah because of how overpowered it is. If you find a Divine chosen, you can either go to 4 or 6 Divine depending on who you can 2-star during the roll down. These 2 variations shown are just to serve as a basic guideline as you'll need to adapt them based on your opponents and shops. For example, seeing a lot of AP based comps, you might want to run 4 Mystic if you find a Mystic chosen. Or seeing a lot of carries without QSS in the corners, you probably want to sub in Aatrox and then pull them in. Positioning Kayle is quite difficult as she's a very squishy carry and can be useless if placed in the wrong area of the board. Example positioning for Kayle is as follows. Generally, Kayle wants to be in the back left or right corner if she has rapid fire cannon as she can attack safely from a distance. If she doesn't have RFC, you can consider moving her to the 3rd row so she's able to start attacking immediately. But be aware, if you don't have Quicksilver Sash, she's more vulnerable to crowd control from this spot. In certain matchups, it's important to move Kayle to the back middle. Two that can come to mind are Aurelion Sol and Aatrox if you don't have Quicksilver Sash or Trap Claw. Aurelion Sol targets the furthest unit away, so generally that is the opposite corner of Aurelion Sol, which is where our Kayle usually resides. You can use Azure Soldiers or target dummies as bait in the corners so he doesn't touch your Kayle with his beam. The same concept applies for Aatrox. If Kayle is in the corner without a defensive item, she'll be pulled in and subsequently killed, so we have to put her in the back middle of this matchup. That's going to be our guide for Kayle. We hope that you managed to learn something new and implement it into your own games to start farming that sweet LP. Don't forget, if you want to join our Discord community for League of Legends and Wild Rift, we also have that in the link down below. Anyway, with that all being said, don't forget to answer our question of the day in the comments down below, subscribe to our YouTube channel, like, and comment. We love you guys as usual, and stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Peace.